make sure I can see the chat. All right. Oops. Okay, there we are. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Maddie Cash. I am an attorney here at MAT. If you're new here, every first and third Tuesday of the month, we do Township Tuesday, where we go over just kind of relevant updates or a refresher course on some township law, where you guys have the opportunity to kind of ask us questions and work through those issues. So today, I thought it would be very seasonal to talk about cemeteries because Halloween is coming up, and I won't see you guys before then, so it was a perfect time. But before I do that, I'll get into a few MAT updates and kind of talk about those a little bit too. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, put it in the chat. I can see it. I'll try to keep an eye on that as we go through this. Otherwise, if it's not related to this or you just want to ask me in private, my email and telephone number will be at the end. So you can jot those down too. All right, so the agenda today, I'll go over MAT updates and then the difference between public and private cemeteries, how we might acquire cemeteries, managing a cemetery, paying for cemeteries, what burials look like, what those requirements are, and then penalties surrounding these cemeteries. So first, MAT updates. So we have November trainings coming up. Those trainings are on the 12th, the 14th. There will be 2 on the 18th. And then on the 19th and the 20th at various times. Oh, Town of Warri has a question. Strange question about ARPA money. We are going to spend it on broadband, but that isn't working for us. We would like to spend it on replacing the parking lot and some hockey lights. Is this something we can spend our money on? And where can I find documentation stating that we can spend this without getting into trouble? So yeah, with ARPA money, they came out with later regulations that basically said you can spend it on anything that the town may have lost funds for during COVID. So it's really anything, you can spend the money on anything township related that isn't debt. And that is we have a ARPA section on our website, and that information would be located there. If you can't find it, just email me and I can send it to you as well. But yeah, so back to the November training. So those are on the 12th, the 14th, the 18th, the 19th, and the 20th. They are 3 hours long. The time ranges vary, so find one that works for you. The times are on our website, but it's located at our office here in St. Michael. You can pre-register online, and it is $30. Then after that, we have, of course, the annual conference on December 13th and 14th. It's at River's Edge Convention Center in St. Cloud. We would really love all of you to come there and get to know each other, get to know us, get some good information from the attorneys here as well as outside counsel. And then also we'll have the annual meeting there where we'll go over the audit report and resolutions from L&R. All right, so that's it for MAT updates. And then let's dive into cemeteries. So there are two different types of cemeteries. There's public cemeteries and private cemeteries. And they do kind of just mean what they say, right? The public cemeteries, I'll go over first. They're governed by Minnesota Statute 306. Most cemeteries are public cemeteries. It doesn't mean it's owned by a government entity. Both private entities and public entities can have a public cemetery, but it's generally defined as a burial ground established by either a public entity, such as a township, or a religious or nonprofit organization that is open to the public for burial of the dead. So really that's the only requirement for these public cemeteries is that they have to be open to anyone to be buried there. they are intended for public use, right? So the most common owners are cemetery associations. Those are organizations formed to maintain these cemeteries, typically nonprofit or unincorporated groups that ensure proper care and management of the cemetery grounds. Other groups might own them as well, such as companies, but also churches, and of course, a government entity such as the township. Oh, whoops. Rolled back on me. All right, private cemeteries. So private cemeteries are governed by Minnesota Statute 307, and those are cemeteries that are operated and maintained by a private entity. They're subject to different regulations. I won't dive into those today, obviously, because we aren't managing any private cemeteries, but there's restrictions on ownership and such that apply. But there are very few cemeteries that are private. Typically, in order to be considered private, the entrance into the cemetery is greatly restricted, so it's not open to the public, and it's commonly owned by a church or individual families. All right, acquiring a cemetery. How might you stumble upon a cemetery? So a township can create a cemetery under Minnesota Statute 365. So that's a different statute than we talked about. The town could establish a cemetery if there's a public need, and the process starts with a vote from the town's residents at the annual meeting. They can authorize the board to buy land and establish a town cemetery under 365.10. Otherwise, it's really up to the board's discretion regarding how that's formed and what that looks like. The town can acquire land through purchase of the land, through a gift or dedication for cemetery use, or by eminent domain, but that's obviously less common than the other options. You can also transfer a cemetery or get a cemetery transferred to you. If it's a public cemetery association, a transfer can be made to the township. The statute calls for a resolution to be passed by the cemetery board and then approved by a majority of its members. And then in order to accept that cemetery, the town board can adopt a resolution to transfer the property and funds of that association to agree to continue to maintain and operate the cemetery. Notice how it says may accept. You don't have to accept this. Question from Nancy in the chat says, any updates on the family leave reporting and elections updates? Also, did a new township insider go out, as I did not receive one since summer of 2024? So first I'll address the insider. Yes, a new one went out. So you'll want to get in contact with our office and let them know your new email address, maybe, or new address. Maybe it is wrong in our system or it changed. I'm not sure. But you'll want to get that fixed. Also, updates with family leave reporting. Yeah, thank you, Lori. Lori said magazine went out to print, so it'll be mailed in a couple of weeks. Updates on family leave reporting. So family leave reporting is due in October. I don't recall the date right off the top of my head, sorry, but that's reporting for wages from July through September. You'll want to do that on the same website that you do unemployment insurance. It's through the same process. If you don't have a unemployment insurance account set up already, then you can reach out to Deed to have them help you set that up. Otherwise, it's on their website as well to do that. All right. Transferring a cemetery. Okay. A cemetery that is controlled by a town already can be transferred to an existing cemetery association. Oh, thank you, Pat. It's due the 31st, those family leave reporting. Okay, sorry, jumping back and forth. But cemeteries that's controlled by a town can be transferred to an existing cemetery association or corporation. You can either sell it or give it as a gift, and then enter into a contract with the cemetery association for the management or maintenance of the cemetery as you see fit. You would need voter approval for that under Minnesota Statute 365.26. And then when it comes to abandoned or neglected cemeteries, so if a public burial ground has not been owned or maintained by an association for 10 years, the cemetery is then transferred to the town for maintenance. If a cemetery has been neglected and not maintained for 10 years, the town may keep the cemetery free of weeds and otherwise maintain it as well. So preventing acquisition. Whoa, this jumped like crazy. Preventing acquisition. How do we get rid of it? How do we not worry about it, not maintain it? So first you want to focus on who owns it, who might be responsible to care for it. You'll look for a cemetery association that might exist around the cemetery, a church. The county may have some responsibilities under Minnesota Statute 306. Department of Natural Resources is also required to cooperate with local governments to prevent damages or illegal activity in cemeteries. You'll want to contact the State Historical Society and see what kind of records they have, or veterans associations as well. So looking for other folks that might be able to take on these responsibilities is really your first step. If you're looking at dissolving a cemetery, that involves that there is some proper care for existing graves and they are maintained and the legal responsibilities are fulfilled. So somebody does have to take on that role. If you want to settle or dissolve a cemetery, that involves settling financial obligations, ensuring care for those who are already buried there, and transferring those responsibilities to another entity. You could transfer that again to the township or another municipality, a cemetery association, or a charitable organization or religious association. All right, managing a cemetery. So if you do have a cemetery that requires this kind of upkeep, you'll want to create a policy for management. There is a lot of discretion there on what that policy looks like. Employees might include a sexton, which is it was originally a position of the church, but now it's really more just a common cemetery position for managing a cemetery. It's not required, but many entities have them just because they can be responsible for a lot of the work that goes into cemeteries, such as overseeing the burials, marking burial sites, coordinating with funeral homes and families and grave diggers to ensure that those burials meet legal requirements. And they might even be responsible for maintaining accurate records of the deceased and exact locations of these plots. The town board of supervisors would appoint a person like this. Although the board would oversee the overall management, they can delegate those day-to-day operations to the sexton. You would also likely have other caretakers, people mowing the grave site, and potentially a record keeper, because that is kind of an additional job there, because it can be a lot of records to keep track of. Repairs and beautification. So these aren't required, but you can spend money to repair gravestones and monuments that have fallen into despair. You may want to obtain that family's consent if you're making significant repairs, especially if that involves moving a memorial structure or altering a memorial structure. If you have volunteers who want to do this, to beautify the cemetery or to repair the cemetery, then you want to make sure that they are signing a volunteer waiver form. We have a sample of one of those on our website under RM 6000. So you'll want to make sure they do that before they get involved. Towns can also use funds to ornament a cemetery, beautify a cemetery, under Minnesota Statute 365.27. That's not defined, so that might mean flowers or however they see fit to beautify the cemetery. Burials. So sometimes people want to have a green burial, burials that are more natural burials that return the body to the earth in a natural way. These burials aren't required by Minnesota law, but they're allowed and becoming more popular as people are becoming more environmentally conscious. Some cemeteries require a section for these burials because they don't have vaults or liners, so it can cause some issues with the ground maintenance there, and some cemeteries don't allow them at all. So that's really up to the board as to how they want to do that. Most cemeteries require vaults or liners to prevent that kind of sinking, but they can designate an area for natural burials if they want to do that. Burying in the winter, Minnesota statute does require cemeteries to provide burials in the winter to the extent it is possible. They can charge extra for that during difficult weather, but some methods that I found just online looking included using jackhammers, thawing machines, space heaters, electric heaters, or even lighting fires on top of graves. So that's just kind of what I stumbled upon in my search. Why does it keep jumping around like that? But yeah, those are some options, but you do have to provide burials in the winter if you can. All right, paying for a cemetery. How do we pay for it? So mostly the means of paying for a cemetery come from the sale of the lot, right? Money from the lots can be used to improve, upkeep, ornament, or beautify the cemetery. Lots are conveyed as if they're any other real estate, but they can only be used for burial. Yes, it's jumping around because it's haunted. Exactly. My thoughts exactly. Unused lots, if nobody has used the lot or you haven't heard anything about that lot for 40 years, then it reverts back to the township if there's nothing within 40 years since the most recent recording. Towns can also accept donations for cemeteries under Minnesota Statute 365.10. As with any donation, of course, it needs to be accepted by resolution. And then townships can create a perpetual care fund. That's established by the voters at the annual meeting. And you can only add funds if there's not enough funds otherwise to carry out the maintenance of the cemetery. So if the board decides they don't have enough money available from plot sales, donations, private assistance, anything, care fund. You can also create a permanent care fund, which is money established for the purpose of caring for these cemeteries, which cannot exceed $25,000 per acre. So a couple of options for paying for these cemeteries. You can also invest that permanent care fund, and the interest does not have to go to the use or care for the cemetery, or care for the beautifying or the care of the cemetery. All right. All heard 6 feet under, right? Apparently that is not required. So traditional depth is often 6 feet. We've all heard that, but Minnesota law doesn't explicitly mandate this in statute. Instead, it focuses on proper depth to prevent health or environmental issues. So Minnesota Statute 149A .11 addresses the disposal of human remains and says that a burial must be deep enough to protect against disease, only if you do not have, 4 feet from the top of the casket. So there's no, it's 4 feet or whatever depth will prevent any health issues. Local ordinance can also direct specific burial requirements if you want to do that 6 feet, or if you want to implement your own restrictions on that. Here, I'll jump back to our burials page. All right, green burials, we already kind of talked about that. Not required, but you can allow for those. Also, winter burials, we already addressed that. You do have to bury in the winter if you can. And then if somebody is buried in the wrong lot, then the town can remove those remains and re-enter the remains into the correct lot under Minnesota Statute 306.155. If that happens, the town must notify the people legally entitled to that entity beforehand, and the lot owners may also just agree to switch lots. So whoever was buried there, they can just switch that property too, if that's easier, and they agree to do that. So penalties surrounding these graveyards. So it's a misdemeanor for a sexton to not report the removal of remains. So those sextons are mandatory reporters in that regard. It's also illegal, obviously, to trespass onto cemetery lands. That's a misdemeanor. A gross misdemeanor includes defacement or destruction of data belonging to the state, so defacement of anything within the cemetery or destruction of that. And then felonies are obviously the removal of those remains and then theft from a coffin that is underground. It also became illegal this year to sell human remains, so that's a new law. Can't do that either. But that is all. Oh, it went away from, this is haunted. All right, but that is all I have. I do have my information up there. And just so you know, fun fact for Halloween, Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are ranked as most popular Halloween candy. And that's a fun fact that I learned about Halloween. But if you have any other questions, send them to my email or call me. My number is there on the screen. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and happy Halloween.
Thank you. Happy Halloween to you too.
Thanks.